sound so much better without all those rattly bits in, but I'm old-fashioned. And who cares? It's 5 minutes past midday. I fancy going on a little bit of a journey today. We've gone downtown with Petula Clark. From downtown, where? Manhattan? The Bronx? Well, let's jump in that yellow taxi and spend a night in New York with Elbow Birds and the Racketeers. I'm Dave Brown, and these are the Golden Greats. Hiya!
So Dave Brown there talking about his role as head of music. But of course another very important part of the day's output here from Radio Broadland is our news. Let's see what goes on in the newsroom.
The 5 o'clock news, this is Julian Smith. A grim-faced Mikhail Gorbachev is on his way home from America this evening to take personal charge in the aftermath of the massive earthquake which has devastated Soviet Armenia.
News gathering is one of the most important tasks on radio. Not just local, but national and international news is all part of the service. So how is it done at Broadland? Head of News, Julian Smith.
Well, as you can see from the sheer volume of paper on the desk, this is where all the work is done at Broadland. What we like to think is the heart of the operation. Really what gives Broadland its local sound is the amount of local news, the content, the information, the local news that's going on, not just on traffic reports, but also on local affairs, local councils, what they're doing, how they're spending our money, where the next bypass is going, fairly contentious issues like that. Also, we have 6 journalists working out of this room here, keeping in regular touch with people like the police, the fire services, the ambulance, the Coast Guard, to make sure that we're on top of any story that breaks during the day. Allied to that, we have our link into the IRN, the Independent Radio News system, like ITN, Independent Television News. We have our own IRN, which is Independent Radio News, obviously. And they provide us with the international and the national news, which we think of as interest to our listeners out here. Basically, our main operation is to ensure that anything that happens in this local area, we are on top of. We make sure that we're the first to get to that particular story, and then develop the story through the day, because let's not forget, people listen for a long time to Broadland, so they want not just to hear the initial story being given out on the news, but they want to know, well, what flows from that, what's the follow-up, jobs being lost, what does the union think about it, how can we take it on from there. So that's basically the operation as we see it here.
A massive new holiday attraction in North Suffolk is on schedule to open to its first visitors next summer. The £70 million Elvedon Park Holiday Village is creating 600 jobs and is hoping to attract 200,000 visitors a year. The holiday attraction covers 400 acres, with the centrepiece being a giant pyramid enclosing a subtropical water theme park. It's being built by the Dutch firm Centre Park, and Managing Director Jeremy Logie says the doors will open on August the 4th.
It will be fully open in August.
All the journalists in here will have their turns at reporting, at doing the news reading shifts, obviously presenting all the bulletins. We do here what's called a mix, i.e. which is taking our local stories and also mixing in with that the national and international stuff that we think is of particular importance to this area. Obviously a big farming story will be much more important to people in Norfolk than, say, it will be in Birmingham, so therefore we can use our own local knowledge of the area to make sure that the stories that we do take in from the national and international sources are of particular interest to people in this area. I think that's one of the reasons why the Broadland News Service has been so successful, because we do have that affinity, we have that feeling, because we live here, we work here, and we're talking to people in this area all the time. So we got a pretty good idea of the sort of things that interest them.
The first reporters have to be in by at least 5 a.m. to be able to prepare the morning bulletins. You may have seen the radio car out and about, collecting Norfolk and North Suffolk's most important news stories, making sure the Radio Broadland listener is kept completely in the picture.
That's Broadland Report at 7 minutes past 8.
Radio Broadland in stereo. FM 102.
Broadcasting from the old Norwich shoe factory in Norwich's Colgate, Radio Broadland has become the area's most successful radio station.
What a beautiful noise coming up from the street. Got a beautiful sound. It's got a beautiful beat.
One noise that may not be so beautiful, the commercials. Unlike the BBC, Radio Broadland isn't funded by the public. It has to make its own money to survive. So how does it go about the all-important task of selling the station's airtime?
Well, we have a team of 5 salespeople who are going out and about and visiting local businesses and trying to persuade them to invest in radio advertising. They would do this by talking to the individual clients, finding out their needs and requirements, what the weaknesses might be in terms of their own business, and therefore trying to persuade them into using radio, because there are certain ways in radio can help improve the company's image, awareness, and obviously, as far as the listener is concerned, bring to them different offers and deals that they have going at any one particular time.
Morning, Simon.
Hello, Mark. How are you today?
Fine, thanks very much.
Fine.
Just come to talk to you about your
advertising on radio.
Oh, yes.
It's rather like a news headline.
Badly, really.
It is the only thing that's on the radio at that particular time. And providing the commercial is good enough and breaks through the concentration of the listener, can actually bring the product that the client is advertising right to the forefront, and therefore persuade them to go along to that particular business and buy that product.
It's particularly useful, actually, when you're doing something like, you know, in our situation we have ordinary high street shops, and we have a couple of stores which are off-centre, off-location, secondary, out-of-town trading locations, yeah? Now, with those, you know, sometimes you open those on a day, on a bank holiday, when you don't open the rest of the shops, you know, and you will need to be able to pluck them out and talk about them specifically, and that's where the radio comes in fairly handy, you know?
And the specific promotions with the forthcoming satellite television that you plan to do, you're going to do some special radio campaigns as well?
Yeah, well, I think radio perhaps, you know, suits rather well, because, you know, the sort of high-tech product needs to be put over in a fairly simplistic sort of way, and we don't want to complicate things, and perhaps, you know, radio maybe lends itself better to that than the press.
We can make a few in-house commercials, but we prefer to use John Manford Studios out at Heatherset, who produce, I would say, 95% of our locally produced commercials. There are other production houses around and about, but John Manford Studios we use on most occasions.
Radio Broadland employs up to 6 sales executives to fill the advertising breaks. The price of a commercial varies and depends on many things: the length, the amount of commercials required overall, and the time of day it's played. It would appear, though, that the local businesses are attracted. Can these commercials then add to Broadland's local flavour?
I think so, yes, because it makes it sound more local. The fact that you've got Roy's of Wroxham, B.B. Adams, that local address, it's the same as local dedications. It gives us a more local flavour. You listen to Radio 1 and they're talking about people up in Scotland or in Wales, has no relationship to the area in which you're talking about. Advertising with a local flavour gives a more local feel about the station. I think it's very, very important.
So that's the sales team, who get to handle quite a few of these things. They're called cartridges. Each one of these contains a commercial, a jingle, maybe a news story. It's a continuous loop of tape which will re-cue itself once it's been played. A vital part of Radio Broadland's operations. Now let me introduce you to one of my colleagues, a man you might well have caught or even heard walking down your street. Yes, it's Dick Hutchinson.
Right, well basically I'm the features producer, and which means getting people in to interview, mainly in Dave Brown's programme and Chrissy Jackson's. They have about 3 slots in the morning, about 2 slots in the afternoon. My job, so part of the job, is to sort of get people to come along, people from Norman Tebbett we had in just the other week, Sue Pollard we've had in as well, local people as well, someone who recently went to Everest to clear rubbish up from the base camps there. He just came in the other day to say the sort of things he found. So whether local people, national people, you name them, we try and get them in to have an even spread throughout the day. So we're walking down your street. It was something we did during the summertime, and we went out and about in the early hours of the morning, sort of knocking on people's doors. And the good thing about that is the fact that they didn't know you were going to knock at their door, and you weren't too sure which door you were going to knock at either. And I remember one particular one, there was knocked on the door, and it was some time before the person answered. And of course it's all live, so you got to more or less just keep talking until someone did answer. And suddenly this woman came to the door with a towel wrapped around her. I'd unfortunately dragged her out of the shower, and there she was, standing with this towel around her. And the worst thing about it is she had an Alsatian dog barking away as well, so I more or less made my excuses and left pretty quickly.
Radio Broadland Action Line.
Another group of unsung heroes at Broadland, the Action Line Department, providing regular input to the broadcasting day. In charge, Janine Crocombe.
Well, we deal with public service announcements, and those can range anything from what's-ons from the public